the amount of time on the play clock when the game clock was running at the snap of the ball. And what we'll find is that the Niners only snapped the ball in the fourth quarter with 20 or more seconds on the play clock. Actually, we'll call it 17 or more seconds on the play clock. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. Most of those were on first downs. But I'm going to just rattle off times on the play clock. The Niners get the ball down 2 touchdowns with 10 minutes and 42 seconds left. On the first play of the drive, they snap it with 20 seconds on the play clock.
Good job.
Game clock's not running, so it doesn't really matter. Here we go. 9 seconds, 7 seconds. There was a 6 second, but then the clock got reset right before the snap, so I'll throw that one out. 6 seconds. That's when they hit Ayuk, but there's a penalty. After the penalty, they snap the ball with 4 seconds.
Clock stopped, correct?
On that one, yes. 8 seconds. 24 seconds after a first down. We're at 5:47 now, okay? 2 seconds.
Not good.
Before a 3rd and 12 at the 5-minute mark, Ayuk catches a first down. 25 seconds, bam. It seemed like when the Niners got a first down, they would then try to hurry, which is a thing that teams do. But snap infraction on Brendel, 12 seconds is when they snap it after that penalty. 26 seconds on 2nd and 14, 17 seconds, 27 seconds on 2nd and 1, 9 seconds on 4th and 1.
Well, you notice that stretch of 26, 17, and 27. I mean, the clock is starting to really dip, right? I mean, you're starting
really
to get
dipping. You're
getting close to the 2-minute warning by then.
John, I think it mattered back in the third quarter, at the end of the third quarter, when they got the ball with 2:40 and they snapped it at 6 seconds, 8 seconds, and 9 seconds. Like that was, I think that was a problem because it was clear at the end of the third quarter that it was going to be really hard to have 3 more possessions, which usually you need. If you're down 2 scores, how many possessions do you need to take the lead?
Down how many scores?
You're down 2 scores. You're down 14 points. So how many possessions do you need?
I mean, multiple?
Yeah, you usually would say you need 3. And this is where we get to my theory, which is this. I think Kyle Shanahan was going to go for 2 and not play for overtime. I think he was going to end the game at the end of regulation. He was going to score a touchdown. He was going to kick off. He had all 3 of his timeouts when the Niners failed on that 4th down. He knew what Arthur Smith was going to do because it's what he would do. Arthur Smith was going to run it 3 times. They were going to call all 3 of their timeouts, and they were going to get the ball back pretty quickly, which is actually what ended up happening. Was they called their timeouts, they got the ball back, the Falcons had to punt to them. It just didn't matter because the game was over. But I think Kyle Shanahan was thinking about injuries.
Is that when they went on their field goal drive?
Yeah. But I think Kyle Shanahan was thinking about injuries in the sense that he was not going to play overtime. And I think what he was doing, and maybe he would have liked to have had it quicker. I think you can call different plays and still snap the ball faster. But I think what he was trying to do, and the Niners do everything kind of on these very thin margins. So when it goes bad, it goes really bad, right? Like it's like, I've said this for months now. It's like running the Princeton offense. Like it just has to be really precise. It's like being Virginia basketball with Tony Bennett. Like it has to be really precise. And if it's not working, it could blow up on you. And I think what he was trying to do was take time off the clock, only give Atlanta 1 more possession, get the ball back because he had all 3. He was not using timeouts. Get the ball back from Atlanta with like 2.5 minutes, get down the field, score, go for 2. I think he was going to go for 2 to try and win the game and not go to overtime. That is my theory. I think that's what Kyle Shanahan was thinking. It failed. It did not work. He ended up taking.
You assumed he was going to go for 2 the first go around because that's what the numbers say, or just
no? I think he was going to try and score a touchdown right there, right on that drive that ended up failing on 4th down. Score a touchdown, kick the extra point. He still had all 3 timeouts. He knows Arthur Smith's going to run the ball. Arthur Smith is not going to ask Mariota to do anything crazy. Maybe he would have thrown it on 3rd down, maybe, but maybe not. Get it back, score again, and then go for 2. I think that's what Kyle Shanahan was thinking.
If that is truly what he's thinking, that's a little nuts to me. Not the 2-point part, but the bleed the time and play it out perfectly because I would say the conventional wisdom of any coach, once your back's against the wall in a 4th quarter, is to score as quickly as you can, right? Because it's just hard to score.
Yeah.
And it was hard for the 49ers to score. It's been hard for them to score this year. I saw someone wrote touchdowns in the second half minus the Panther game has not been pretty this year. Like they have not been some explosive second half offense. But to me, the number one argument just simply goes to basic situational fundamental football. Two things. You should be able to run your offense, not some breakneck 1 minute offense, right? Kind of, I think it's considered more the 4 minute offense, which is a higher paced, but you still have a little time. 4 minute offense with 10 minutes. You have to huddle every time. No one's expecting, Lincoln Riley, Mike Leach offense, but this is the National Football League. Can you run an offense without kind of consistently huddling or kind of do some muddle huddle where you can communicate? And I would say when most of your core players, skill guys, have all been together for a while, you should be able to do that, right? I mean, think who's out there. It's guys that have been on the field now for, even Juwan Jennings now, consistently a long time. And then I think the other knock would be, like, you could put it on Jimmy, put it on Kyle. It's probably a combination of them both. The play clock thing is kind of egregious. Because, okay, huddle, but you're fucking in the huddle, be in and out. Like, hey, guy, bang out the call. You should be averaging on that first high teens. I would say 16 to 19 range. Like, I'm not expecting you to get 26 every time if you're going to even do some kind of makeshift huddle. But what's the point of all this practice? This is what I never understood about the NFL. You're spending all this time in the film room, in the meeting rooms, on the field, extra work. Like, I think it's what really bugs. Like, fans ultimately just get mad because how ugly it is at the end. But I think internally why historically you've seen a lot of like front office and coach fights, players turn on coaches, owners turn on coaches and general managers. They go, what are you wasting all this time on? You're spending all this fucking time. You guys, it's pretty well documented. Like, Kyle's there early, stays late. Like, what are you guys doing? Like, this is a pretty basic element of football. You're in a situation where you're down a couple scores late in the game. Like, don't you practice that quote unquote situation? What does every Belichick guy forever say about those 20-year runs? Like, we practice fucking everything. There was no stone left unturned, let alone the basic stuff, right? Must have short yardage, must have 3-minute drives. Like, that feels like a pretty basic scenario. Hey, when you factor in, while there is more time technically on the clock, like you said, the game is played out pretty consistently. That 10 in reality probably is more like 6, 7 based on the time of possession, right? Like, you can't assume you're getting 3 possessions even though there's 10 minutes left on the clock.
Yeah.
So your urgency has to be higher, but they can't really operate unless it's like 1 minute left, just kind of doing the no huddle, pointing the numbers.
Right.
Couldn't they do some like halfway point of that? Maybe not that, but definitely not what they were doing. And then it's on Jimmy and Kyle to like be on the same page. Like, we got to get the ball snapped when there is in the high teens, not at 6, 7, because that's all of a sudden 13 seconds. You're talking about, close to a minute in 4 or 5 plays you're wasting. Especially
once you're 4 minutes into the drive and you still have a lot of drive to go, right? At that point, pick it up. And they did a little. They did pick it up around the 4.5 minute mark after the snap infraction by Brendel. That got snapped to 25. Then they snap at 12, 26, 17, 27. But it's too late. It was late by that point. Well, what do you think everyone is kind of like the Monday night game truly shitting on those two coaches for? Just feels like they're kind of lost, right? When you say Nate Hackett, just like a timeout's needed because my punt team's not on the field. Right.
I don't know whether to go for it, and I do.
I mean, I know for the Chargers, the way they operated with 2 timeouts, a minute and more than a minute left from their own 25 with one of the strongest arm quarterbacks in the league. I thought that was bad. Well, there was a moment at the end of the first half. The score, I think, was 10-7. And the Broncos, was it the Broncos? No, it was the Chargers. The Broncos didn't have any timeouts. The Broncos were on defense. There's a minute left. So if you just run the ball, you're going to kick the field goal, which they ended up kicking anyway, at 20 seconds. Instead, they throw a pass. It gets tipped by, Herbert's pass gets tipped. The Broncos end up getting the ball back. A couple plays later, Russ hits a huge play, and they get a field goal out of it because they were given a lot of time. Like, just basic, just run the ball. Time management, whether it's running out the clock or whether it's having the composure, understanding, and the urgency to move on both ends of the ledger, right, are really what coaches,
I mean, for a long period of time, Andy Reid got destroyed for his clock management at the end of halves and end of games. And whether it's fair or not, like that's just a huge part coaches get knocked on. And I think someone tweeted at you and I today thinking we were being crazy on Kyle for this because, like, you know, a penalty happened. Like, well, yeah, penalties happen on drives. Like, you don't get an excuse like penalty, set them back. It could have been at the 40. I don't care. Like, I just can watch a team and go, yeah, it feels like maybe they've coached it at practice. But if it's happening at practice and not working in the game, which you would say under Kyle Shanahan, it hasn't really worked in the game, you're not practicing it well enough. And that's your job as a coach, to figure out all these situations that you're really shitty at. Like, one thing I know the 49ers don't need to do, 4th and 1. They're going to get it. Why? Jimmy's a great sneaker, right? There are going to be situations like defensively. Clearly,
they should have done it on 3rd and 1.
They should have. But like, you feel pretty good when they're in that situation. If they want to go to it, they're going to get it. I feel like whatever D'Amico's operating on over there feels like they got most situations pretty well handled. There is a glaring issue with Kyle on the urgency of certain drives, that the way his offense is conducted, and ultimately he's the maestro. He's not the guy playing the fucking flute or the drums. Like, that's ultimately Jimmy leading the charge. But Kyle is in charge of everything. It is not it's not translating. And it hasn't for a while in certain spots, in that spot when they got to go fast. And it gets back to me, the huddle part of his offense. And I think the criticism is like, can Kyle truly, like, if Kyle wasn't allowed, like, no zone runs this week, no zone runs, could you develop a game plan? I think Kyle, I am not someone who's often thinks he should be fired by any means. I think he's a really good coach. But I do think, and I like having a core philosophy, anything in life, things you stand for, morals, in your business, whatever. Like, I do think it's easy to have something to specifically fall back on every time. Pete Carroll changed his career when he went to specific things to fall back on. So I'm cool with it. But like, offensive masterminds, like, I do think you got to be open-minded, and you defended, or you brought it up on Sunday, that like, he just can't, he doesn't trust Jimmy, and you understand, and most people do. But I do think you have to just, at times, like, you're going to lose anyway. That's my thing. It's like, it's not like you're going undefeated or winning all these games. You just have to be willing to at least try it. And if it fails, like, you lost by 14 points. But he's never willing to, like, you know, I'm not comfortable doing this. I'm not comfortable doing this. And he won't get out of the comfort zone often. And that, to me, is the one thing as he matures as a play caller, if he's ever going to want to win games like that, because we talked about the stat. That we all are in agreement. That stat is batshit crazy, right?
Oh, for when trailing by 7 going to the 4th quarter. 0 for 24,
0 for 25.
25.
After the Falcons game. And who were the other two teams in the mix? I think Duval put it out. I'm pretty sure it was the Washington Commanders and the Detroit Lions. Like, the company he's keeping in that is pretty ugly. So I think it's very fair that just a guy that's very good at his job has to just figure out one little element to figure it out. And this is where I get back to the coaches. Kyle spends so much time he's balls deep right now. We're recording this 2:45 Tuesday. This is game plan day. He's watching Spagnuolo, Frank, and how to block Chris Jones, and what Justin Reed had, the bad steps he takes, and if McDuffie's going to play, and the rookie Watson. That's great. But like, football, ultimately it's on his team and the execution, not what Kyle knows, right? Because I feel Kyle knows it. But does his team know it? Sometimes they don't. And sometimes he's not willing to be like, well, I know it, but I don't think they can do it. That's kind of what it feels like sometimes.
Well, what do you mean? I mean, because I do think when he doesn't push the ball, like in that 4th quarter, consistently push the ball, I know sometimes they throw it down the field, but as I said the other day, I think it all has to be set up like a chess match, right? These are not.
And I think that's
I think he thinks that his chances are better of winning a game when he plays it the way he plays it than if he opens it up specifically for Jimmy Garoppolo.
Did I drop the line, do it right, longer? Did I say that the other day? Someone DM'd me yesterday, maybe 2 days ago, that Robert Saleh said in this press conference that one of their keys as a team moving forward, and has been this year, is do it right longer. And it's something that he got from Kyle. basically like you just do it right longer, you're ultimately going to win.
Mm.
And like you said, like I think Kyle just thinks the chess match, the chess match, the chess match, and it works. But I do think sometimes you got to throw the fucking chess match out of the window when you're down 14 points. Like I'm all for playing Bobby Fischer and being a robot and knowing what's going on in a tie game against the Rams or you held the Chiefs. Maybe if it's your tie game and that's not the place. And I think that's the pushback from any level-headed fan. Like, bro, you kind of got to freewheel it, man.
Do it right longer really explains what we saw. Like the belief that
Robert Saleh said that that's something Kyle says a lot, and he's
interesting. I don't know if his quarterback is capable of it, but that makes a lot of sense, right? If we just consistently do the same thing on every play, the other team will make a mistake. Well, when you're down 14, they don't have to make any mistakes. There's 10 minutes left in the game. They're not going to throw you a pick six, right? That would be a mistake. That's very interesting. That's very interesting. Now, but I'll go back to, I do think the injuries, that's my theory. What do you think of the theory? Do you think it's a plausible theory that Kyle, he was not playing for 3 possessions. There was not enough time for 3 possessions. He was playing for 2 possessions. There was not a chance in hell he was going to get a 3rd possession, and he certainly was not going to go to overtime with his defense, as beat up as it is.
I would lean toward yours. He wanted no part of overtime, the team being beat up. I don't think he's cognitively thinking when he's down 2 scores, trying to score, like I'm going to not get my guys injured and do a slow drive. Like if he is, that to me is a little crazy. Because part of it is to be a little numb when you're in the game. I would get maybe if like all your quarterbacks have been knocked out, like Debo's playing quarterback or something.
Yeah. I do. Part of the theory that I believe, I think makes sense, and I'd love to ask him, is that he was trying to reduce the number of possessions. He was going to go for the lead and didn't want Atlanta to have time to get the ball back. Like Kyle Whittingham the other day, for anyone that watched USC Utah, right? Kyle Whittingham went for 2 at the end of the game and took the lead.
Yeah.
With like 48 seconds left. He decided to go for 2 when that drive started. Before Utah scored a touchdown, when they got the ball, he told his offensive coordinator, have your 2-point play ready. Depending on the clock, we're going to go for 2.